Hey, this is DJ.
This is Kaz. We're buried above ground,
And this is Speak of the Devil podcast.
Greetings from Podcastville. The Speak of the Devil podcast is in episode 33. Here we go. We have some new topics to talk to you about tonight, as this is the Christmas edition of the Speak of the Devil podcast. We are only 2 days removed from Christmas in 2019, and it's been a very good year, very wonderful year. And it's been a wonderful year for me, but for some people it has not been. And you know, sometimes parting is such sweet sorrow. But we're going to get into some music stuff. And the most pertinent thing that we have to talk about is Innovation Concerts, which has been basically over the last decade. They've been, you know, the primary pulse and vein and heart of the hard rock and metal community in the Toledo, Ohio area. Cody and Brock, they've allowed people like me and others to, express their individuality, their original ideas, their music, in multiple forums. They've over the last decade, they've had, many different forums and venues that we've played. And if nothing else from me, I'd like to say, from Devils of America, thank you to Innovation Concerts. In some ways it's cliche, but they kind of made at least my dreams come true, of creating a project with friends and creating, cultivating something, but not just being able to have a project that you make on a computer or you make a CD or something like that, but the ability to actually go out and play live and play to the community, which is something that above all, that is my favorite place to be, is on stage. And Innovation Concerts allowed that. So thank you to them. And who knows what the future holds for venues and gigs around this area. Maybe somebody will pick up the baton and do that. It might take a long time for that to happen, but I, for one, am proud to have been a part of at least at least a decade-long tradition. So thank you to Innovation Concerts. And I will say some notable people that we were allowed to open for, Flaw, multiple times. And in fact, last year, actually able to do a podcast at Frankie's with Flaw, which was very cool. It's a couple episodes, maybe 10 episodes back or something like that. But we also got to open for Head PE a couple times, which was, also, very cool. Didn't do any podcasts. I would say the most notable experience of people that, I felt was proud to open for was Angel Vivaldi, which is, he's just an amazing metal progressive. He's like the modern day Joe Satriani. But whereas like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai were like great soloists or whatever, like the backing tracks were always kind of like weak. Like the thing about Angel right there is that he has actually really heavy, metal rhythm tracks behind it. And, so that way it makes it that much cooler. you'll see him in the opening crawl on the picture here. But that was probably the most notable. So I was happy to to open for all those, and then we were also to able to see some great shows from Innovation Concerts. Rest Repose, that is now Dragged Under, which is very big. Like I said, like, I don't know, maybe 15 episodes ago, Fluff actually introduced, the podcast or whatever. And probably another great show was Doyle, who also has introduced this podcast. But I mean, it was great because right now Doyle is back with the Misfits, who I have now. He's signed, this vest to make it kind of official, but they're headlining Misfit shows as the original lineup again. So that was an amazing experience to see him front row. And then probably the best and absolutely craziest show that I've ever seen, which again you'll see in the opening picture montage of this, was Machine Head. I got that picture with Rob Flynn staying out till I think I was out there till 2 a.m. before he finally came out to get that picture. But that show was extremely interesting in the fact that the venue that they had it at was like this bar where, it was Main Street, where in the middle it's like there's two bar, like one side is the bar, and then there's a bar on the other side, but there's a stage there as well, and we've played that stage, but it's like a bottleneck where that's the only entrance for normal people or civilians to get into that other side. And I remember seeing being ready for Machine Head I was standing right on the stage, not realizing that this bottleneck was going to turn into a rush, a sea of people, that as soon as they started playing, like opening their opening note or whatever, it was just this flood through the bottleneck of just a sea of people, to the point where I've been to tons and tons of shows, but that was the only show that I've ever felt that my safety was in danger, because sometimes people get crushed, and if you get thrown on the bottom, you can get trampled on or whatever. It has happened where people have died at concerts or whatever because of just the body crush of people. And at one point, that's what I felt like was happening, and I was about ready to jump over the bar and get behind the bar and just explain, like, well, I'm gonna get crushed if I don't move. Luckily that didn't happen. I was able to kind of duck out, and I ended up, unfortunately, at the back of the venue, because it was the only safe place. It was nuts. So that's what I mean. It was like the whole place was raging. It should have been at a bigger venue, but maybe that was the charm of it, because that place was nuts. It was the craziest concert that I've ever seen Innovation put on, was the Machine Head at Main Street. And to this day, still put, like I said, in the opening pictures, he's Rob Flynn is with me, and still wear the tank top. So thank you to Innovation Concerts. I guess that's it for them for promoting shows in Toledo. We'll see if anybody picks it up. Maybe not. This genre of metal and hard rock is certainly a dying genre around these parts anyway. So that's why it's hard to see them go. Like it's certainly kind of a sad moment. It's not a moment where you're rejoicing at all, because there's nowhere else to go really in Toledo anyway. I'm sure some other bands, they've come some connections in the Detroit area, and maybe some Indiana territories. I'm not sure, but if you're around here and you're local, everything has been shut down. So it's as much as I like to reflect on the good things that has happened in the last decade. It's very sad to see that it's over. That the scene apparently cannot sustain itself enough to allow the promoters to allow people like me to present their art. So, it's sad to see them go, but I'm very thankful for what they did provide to people like me. So we will move to what would be video games, but this week there's not very many video games. We're gearing up for Christmas. Everything's kind of, we know what is. So we're going to talk about the Rise of Skywalker movie. So spoilers. If you have not seen the movie, maybe skip maybe 5 minutes ahead of this, maybe 5-10 minutes of this, probably 5, because I am going to spoil the shit out of this right now. So spoilers. So if you, again, I don't know how many times I gotta say this. Have I told you it's a spoiler? It's a spoiler. Okay. So let's get into the spoiler kind of reactions from the Rise of Skywalker. So from when you see the opening crawl, the dead speak, and Palpatine has put out this message across the galaxy that finally he is back. He is, put himself in a physical form enough that he is ready to announce that he's back. Which, of course, creates some plot holes. Like, how did he survive the fall of being thrown? Well, some people say that the blue essence that you see was the essence of him, his life force of the Sith, and he was expecting that somebody might kill him, and that they took that life force and transferred it into some metaphysical body using, the force magic, like they said. Like, some things are considered unnatural. Because when you finally see him, I mean, he looks like something out of a horror movie. He has like half of his fingers, and he has no pupils to his eyes. He's totally deformed, hooked up to some crazy machine. To not, overshadow or, the Return of the Jedi ending where Vader throws him off. Like, he did die. He died. It wasn't that he survived. Like, I mean, he did survive, but like the physical body was killed, but the essence, and he knew how to do Sith magic, like they say in the end, and we watch it. The Sith magic kind of captured his essence, transferred it into this husk of a body, and somehow it took him 30 years to get back to this point where he's finally created again. So, which leads us to Snoke. Which Snoke was always just a genetic clone, which cloning is not very shocking. Episode 2 is called Attack of the Clones. I mean, clones have been in this for a while. Even in this trilogy, in the first stuff, The Force Unleashed, when they're talking about how Finn, rejected the First Order, like, how could they do that? Maybe we should get a clone army. Like, they talked about it in this own trilogy, so cloning is not like that far off to explain how he was. So basically, you start off with, the Emperor telling Kylo that I've been every voice in your head, everyone, which makes sense because in the Force Unleashed, Kylo is asking Darth Vader to show him the dark side again, which makes no sense because Vader was redeemed. Why would he come back as a dark side anything to tell him anything? He wasn't. It was Palpatine the whole time. Palpatine was Snoke inside of his body possessing him. So it's been Palpatine all along, which leads us to the fact that Rey is also a Palpatine. She had to be somebody. Everybody wanted her to be somebody. Personally, I thought the Kenobi would have been a better play because it would have made sense, especially with her trying to be on the light side. But look, you're trying to go for, just mass craziness, so why not be a Palpatine? That explains how wildly overpowered she is in the first movie and the second movie. She's a Palpatine. She's of the Emperor's blood. So they kind of like, it's like they're trying to actually close some plot holes from the other movies, even though, yeah, this movie creates its own plot holes, but they're trying to plug some other ones because there's so many, especially that The Last Jedi created, that they have to do it. Which, leads me to another thing. Hux is a traitor to the First Order. He's actually part of the New Republic, which I guess you could understand, but I mean, man, the way he delivers that speech when they're about ready to shoot Starkiller Base and Force Unleashed, he's an actor. He was definitely being a good actor, but maybe some of the things in his eyes, but every other stupid, silly, goofy thing that he did kind of now makes sense. Like in The Last Jedi when he's sitting there with Poe, sitting there making the stupid, how's your mother kind of speech or whatever, delaying the attack. Maybe he wasn't delaying. Maybe he knew that somebody like Poe needed the time to be able to attack the dreadnought to be able to take it out. So there's a lot of things that do work with that, but there's a couple things that don't. And then, which leads us all the way to the end. I don't want to spoil too much, even though I have spoiled a lot, but I don't want to give away the whole movie. But at the end, a lot of people weren't sure, but yes, Kylo is ultimately redeemed, because when they're having this fight on the Death Star wreckage or whatever, there's this moment where Leia distracts Kylo and he's not paying attention, so Rey is able to take his saber and kill him. But then she ultimately force heals him, which brings him back to the light. So he's Ben Solo. He has a moment where he has a memory, not a force vision. He has a memory of his father, and that ultimately allows him to chuck away the old lightsaber, because he realizes now that he's been manipulated by the Emperor the whole time, because the Emperor was waiting for his own family to ascend to the throne and take his own power. But when they couldn't do that, he tried to manipulate Ben Solo to become Kylo in this thing, which is great. I think that's a perfect explanation. But in the end, when Ben finally realizes how much he's been manipulated, he rejects it all, especially after his mother sacrificed herself to bring him back. And then he is Ben Solo at the end. And then when, they combine to fight the Emperor, he's, ultimately what brings Rey back to life, and that act of redemption puts him back as a Jedi Force ghost, and he fades out into existence, which, I have no problem with, because the badass nature of what he originally was is not diminished, from Force Unleashed. It's just that by the end you realize that he was manipulated. And again, what are you going to do? You got 2 different directors, 3 different writers. This has never been a cohesive thing from the start. And I've heard that this movie opened to $176 million, which is the lowest of the trilogy. I think Force Awakens opened to like 240 something million. It's just the law of diminishing returns. We hadn't, when Force Awakens came out, we hadn't seen a movie since Revenge of the Sith, which, everybody now apparently is going to love the prequels, because, hey, now, everyone seemingly hates the new trilogy as well. So which trilogy would you choose to hate on, I guess, is the question at the end of the day. Personally, I love all the trilogies. I love all 9 films. They're all great. If you want to nitpick, you can nitpick. If you want to just suspend your disbelief and have a good time and enjoy the movie, The Rise of Skywalker is great. It's a perfect movie. So, 9 out of 10. And wrestling, not too much going on in wrestling. We're heading into 2020. AEW, NXT, SmackDown. It'll be an interesting year to see how that all plays out with Royal Rumble, and who's going to challenge for the belt and all that kind of stuff. But nothing too big to report on wrestling. So there you go. That is episode 33 of the Speak of the Devil podcast. And we'll see you on episode 34. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody.